Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the second video. And in the last video, we created this program. I showed you guys how to get Visual Studio Code set up, and this should be actually multi-platform, so it should work on Mac and Linux. So if it doesn't, I'd be surprised because that was like the whole touting feature of Microsoft coming out with this new product. Anyway, so a lot of tutorials they're going to jump into like what is a string and what is an integer and all this other stuff, and I'm not actually going to get into all of that right now because it really just doesn't. I feel like the concept doesn't matter to somebody that's beginning programming. So instead what I want to do is just I'm going to focus on the string because the string I think is one of the few that is really important. Python can do math and stuff like that, but a lot of you guys may not be jumping into immediate math with Python, and then there's still going to be this disconnect where you're like, okay, I can use Python like a calculator, but now what am I supposed to do? One of the hardest things for me when I was first starting programming is to actually see the bigger picture. Like, why do I need a string? Why is it even called a string? I can't tell you why it's called a string, but I can tell you a string is a type in every programming language that you're ever going to see, probably. So it's just a series of characters, and it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even like the characters can be actual letters, they can be numbers, but it's if you're just starting out, you're like, why are you telling me this, dude? But anyway, let me show you an example. In Python, in order to assign values, you're going to use things called variables. And variables can be any name that you want them to be. So my variable. This variable has an underscore in it. That's what this character is here. It's an underscore. That's considered a legal variable. In fact, it's actually a normal looking variable in Python. A lot of places and a lot of languages, they'll have you do stuff like this where you'll say my variable. And that's also valid as well. But a lot of people, they separate the first word, which is my, and then the second word, which is variable, with a capital letter here. And this is actually called camel case. But you don't have to deal with any of this shite either, so don't even worry about it. We're just going to say my variable equals, and we're going to say this is a string. So we saw this in the last video, but the reason why strings are important is because anytime you read a file, it could be an HTML file, it could be data like that you're grabbing from a database, it's going to be in string format, and you have to know that, okay, how do I take two strings and add them together and stuff like that. There's certain rules that you have to follow when it comes to dealing with strings. So we could say my variable, and we'll say another one, my second variable equals, this is some more stuff. Now here's two simple strings, and what do I do if I want to actually combine these two together? So we're going to actually do this now. We're going to say my combined variable equals my variable, and you can see that the editor actually tells you the little options that you have. So it says my, oh, you mean my variable, right? Or one of these other ones, but we'll click on my variable plus, and this is just the actual plus keyword, just like addition, and we say my second variable. And if you want, you could just press the enter button and it should finish typing for you. Alright, so now if we want to say I want to print this value to the console, which is down here in our debug console, we just use the print keyword in Python. So we'll say my combined variable. Press Control S to save your file, and one of the things you'll notice up here, when the file is unsaved, this little circle appears over there. If I hover over it, the X shows up, but don't hit the X because it'll close out your script without saving it. But you can see this little circle means you have unsaved changes. So if I hold down Control and S, and now that circle goes away and it's saved. So if I run this program, I'm going to just go ahead and press play, and you can see that it combined these two strings into one statement. But you're going to see this funniness where it's like there's no separation between this first variable and this second variable. There's no separation. So you're like, well, why is that? Well, you could do this if you wanted to. When you're combining strings, you could say, you know what, I'm going to have another string That's just this empty, these empty values here. And if I did that and I run this, another thing too is I think if we press F, oh wait, I'm sorry, this is a syntax error, so this is good. Because anytime you do something bad in Python, it's going to tell you where is the problem at. It says, hey, I ran into a problem on line 5. So we can look at line 5 and we can say, okay, there's some problem here. What is the problem? The problem is we said my variable plus, and then we have this string right here, which, remember, these are just strings as well. But this is a string with no characters except for just a space. But then look, we say my second variable. So the problem is we need the plus sign for every adding, every time we add a new string to another string, we always have to have a plus that's separating the previous string to the string that you're adding. So it can go in a line. You could have literally hundreds of strings that you're all joining together just like this. And realistically, you probably wouldn't. But if you press F5, I think it's F5, it should automatically run the program again. But I'm trying to remember if that's the case. It might be Control F5. Or maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about. We need to kill the program, so we can press Shift F5 to stop the program, or you can just click the little stop button. It doesn't matter. But if I press Control F5, then it should run. So that runs. I'm thinking the control is necessary. It doesn't matter. But anyway, you can see we now have a space here. So this is that space that we added right here. So the proper term for this in the computer programming geek world is string concatenation. So they call it concat, which is like short CONCAT, or concatenation. It's really short for concatenation, but it's concat. It just means combining this stuff together. And you're going to hear people use that term, and you just have to get used to it. It's unusual for sure. All right, let's go ahead and stop the program. So one of the concepts here that I want to get across with you guys is that these are variables and they're whatever name you want them to be. So we created this arbitrary name, but there's certain things that you can't do. Number one, you can't put numbers in front of your variable. It has to be a character. It could be an underscore if you wanted to, but you can't have numbers. You can see it instantly turns red and says, hey man, you can't do that. So don't do that. Also, when you're using Python, just go ahead and use this underscore convention for the most part for any of your little variables that you're going to have. That's what most Python programmers do. You don't have to, but that's probably a good idea to write code the way other Python programmers do in case you start working with other ones or trying to help them with like their GitHub projects and stuff. Another thing too is that there's these reserved words that mean certain things in Python. One of the reserved words, the only one that we've looked at so far, is the print keyword. And you can see if we highlight over this, this actually tells you a bunch of stuff that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you, but it's like prints the values to a stream or to sys.sd or td out. All this stuff is very complex and confusing, but basically programming languages that go out, this sys. It stands for standard out, and it just means print it to the damn console. Whether it's in MS-DOS or, this debug console down here. That's what it means when it says system out. So print will put whatever sort of string that's in here to system out. Now, we'll see in the future, it doesn't have to be a string. There are other types in Python that are not strings. So you're not going to use strings for everything, but strings will be a very, 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 very common thing. Now there's other types of reserved words. In fact, this is the quickest documentation I can find, which is on New Mexico Tech. But this goes all the way back to Python 2.7, which is literally a decade old probably at this point. And these are all like words that you're going to see in the Python language that you can't use as variable names. So you never want to overwrite any sort of variable name with one of these, because that would be a major problem. So here's this print keyword that you can see, which we've used. So there's not a ton of words that you can't use, but basically I never want to be like print equals I just effed up, because I just assign print a new value, which I don't need that in there. Anyway, yeah, I could have that in there, it's fine. I'll do that. All right, so now if I said print, let's see what happens actually. I'm interested. I've never tried this before. Okay, string object is not callable because what we did, and you can see str is short for string, and that's what we've been talking about. It says type error because remember I called string a type. There's different types in Python, and string is just one of several types in Python. But types in any programming language is something that you don't need to understand right now, but it's very important to how programming languages are actually created. You often hear about type systems and it's type safe and all this other stuff. You don't have to worry about that right now if you're just getting started. But that's what it's telling you. It's saying, hey, there's a type error problem because print no longer does anything special like we saw. We overrode print, and print no longer has its meaning. It's a string, and we're now trying to call a string like it's a function. And that's something that we're going to look at as well in future videos, but this print is really just a Python function. It's part of the Python standard library for every Python installation. It comes with a print, and print, like we saw before, it puts all the text and whatever is in there inside these parentheses to the standard output. So now though we've changed what print is, we turned it to a string, and now it doesn't have any idea what we're trying to do here, and that's why line number 9 is where the program errors out. So understanding how to read what these errors are, they're called traceback errors, it's actually a skill that takes years to develop in order for you to be like, okay, that's exactly what the problem is. There's going to be times that when you're a new developer where you might spend like an hour trying to figure out why doesn't this work, what does this mean, and then as you have some experience, you're like, oh, yeah, this object is not callable, so this means that there's no function here. It has no idea what you're trying to do here. We take print out though. We press Control F5 to run the program again, and you can see it works just fine because we didn't overwrite print. All right, now I also want to be practical about why something like this, because once again, one of the hardest parts is how all of this stuff comes together. Because individually, you can look at these concepts and be like, well, this isn't complicated at all. But then you wonder, how does something like this turn into something like YouTube? How were they using simple commands like this to build a website like YouTube? How is the Python, like how does Instagram run on the Django web framework, which is really just Python code to do everything that Instagram does? And the answer to that actually is that Instagram and everything it does is not all Python. But most of its server-side processing and stuff is. So as you'll learn, there's different languages and technologies that are used for different reasons. And you'll have to forgive me if I have a weird voice, by the way. I have a cold and it's really bothering me. So now, raw and uncut, I don't want you to have to worry about anything that I'm doing right here, but I want to show you the benefit of a string. So we're going to leave my variable here. We're going to change its content in just a second. But I want to show you why a string could be, used as something that does a little bit more than you may think. And we're going to say, you know what? We're going to say my out file. In fact, you know what? We're going to say my HTML file equals open, and this is another Python keyword here, open, and then we tell it a path. And once again, you don't have to know any of this stuff. I don't expect you to even be able to follow along on it, but I do need to know where I actually put this this tutorial here, because I need to reference, and I forget already where we put it. And the answer to that question is we put it in this Python for beginners. So Python for beginners, okay. So that's actually what I'm going to do here, Python for beginners. And then I'll just say my HTML file.html, and then I pass in this additional keyword, which means write, and then we're going to say my HTML file.write my variable. Okay, and now instead of this, I'm actually going to put actual HTML in here, and we're going to say title look add this title. Actually, that needs to be inside of a head too. So this is just HTML, guys. So anytime you go to a web page, you're going to see this type of HTML in there. Although this is very kind of raw and uncut. I'm just putting in some stuff in here so we can actually see the example. And I want to put just a title in here, and we'll say hello world. All right, so this is all a string, guys, and it's in HTML format, and we're telling it to write to a file and putting it in this directory right here. And this W means write a new file if it doesn't exist, because if the file existed, we can actually put different commands in there that say, I want you to append the file or add to what's already there. And the W actually will wipe it out every single time it writes a new file. So that doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm going to press Control F5 to actually run this program. And when it's done, I don't think nothing's going to print to the console or anything, so it's not going to look like it did too much. Alright, and now it looks like it was still thinking, but it actually didn't take that long at all. But now look what we have here. We have in our Python for Beginners folder, we now have this my HTML file. So Python created this file, and then look at the file type. Because it's a .html file that Python wrote, you can see that it wants my Chrome can open it, because my Chrome is my default browser. So if I double click on this, and we'll say Chrome, and let me show this so you can see this is actually referencing right there, and we have hello world. So let's look at, and you can even see in the title up here at the top it says look at this. So if we look at the source, you can see it's just our HTML, and the browser knows how to render it. So it could get even more complex, obviously. Like if I said let's put an anchor inside here, and we'll say ahref equals hipstercode.com. Click me. Alright, so let's go ahead and run this again. Control F5. And all I did was add an anchor tag, which is just another HTML thing. And if I pull this up, which I don't think I saved it. 1 second. It didn't run. Sorry, I'm pressing Control F5 to run it again. Alright, so now when we look at the result, you can see that we have this anchor, click me, and if I click it, it actually takes you to hipstercode.com, which is a website that I created. This is also a Python website that is all Python code that's being used to run this. In fact, you can take the quiz, and I'm going to make this free. I was actually charging for the quizzes, but I don't do that anymore. Actually, I haven't made it free yet, but nobody's really using the website very much, so I was only charged, I think it was like $10, but yeah, nobody bought it anyway. I just thought maybe people would be interested, but they don't care, and since they don't care, I'll just make it free. Everything else is free, right? But you can see that it's just there's actual quizzes and stuff like that that are available, but this entire website was built with Python and Django. So some of these examples, once again, I know I'm jumping in fast, and you guys might be like, whoa, what's going on? But you know what? This is the kind of practical stuff that I think people need to kind of swallow, because like a string alone, one of the problems, like I said, is like, I understand the concept of a string, but I don't really understand how a string helps me create an HTML page. I don't understand how I can read an HTML page into a string, because in the same way that I actually wrote an HTML page, I could actually use Python to go to any website across the web, get their HTML source page, and then use Python to start looking for values inside of here. In fact, that's what Google's search engine did. It was originally written in Python, and it went from one site to the next, and then it evaluated its content. And it did it in a way that was more efficient than other browsers at the time, And now, you fast forward to today, and Google is making $21 billion a year in profit. And they did it all on the back of Python initially. And, and that's another thing too. So a lot of you guys are like, I'm older, I'm just getting into programming and all that stuff. And I'll tell you what, there's going to be fantastic programmers in this world. And I may not be one of them, but what matters though is that, do you have the drive to continue to succeed and try? When you start failing, do you maybe take a break for a moment and come back? Do you keep trying? Because you're going to have to keep trying in programming. Things are going to be difficult for you. But I don't think there's any sort of age limit or educational requirement or anything else that tells you whether or not you can solve a business problem. If you have a business mind and you know how to maybe gain a decent amount of knowledge in programming, you don't have to write the next Facebook in order to make decent money. You don't have to be an expert programmer creating some of these fantastic frameworks that are being developed by Facebook and Google and all those guys. You can be successful in this industry with just hard work, determination, and just having a decent understanding of how to solve business problems with programming code. So once again, I know this example might have gotten into a lot with the whole opening file and all that stuff. We're going to look at all that stuff more in the future. But just, right now, this was just to simply tell you, this is one specific, use case for what a string can do. It can write files and anyway, guys, let me know what you think. I appreciate you watching. I'm going to go ahead and cut this video off, and I plan on continuing this series. I'm glad people are excited for it. I'm actually excited for it myself. I really thank Microsoft and Visual Studio Code because I love this editor and the person who created this Python extension. I love that guy too. He makes it so much easier for me to be able to train some of this stuff, because my earlier Python videos, some of the biggest problems that I had was just simply getting past the initial setup phase. Like, it sucks balls trying to get somebody to, okay, you got to install Python. Now you got to understand what a system path is and how to add Python, and you need to then download some freaking text editor, install these plugins and all that stuff, and it's just so much to swallow. If with Visual Studio Code, hopefully it's as simple as install Python, install Visual Studio Code, add the Python extension, and things just work. Hopefully that's working for you guys. And let me know if you have any questions. And once again, thanks for watching. Please subscribe and have a good day. Bye.